1, 2. Okay, it looks like we're live. Okay, great. So let's close YouTube. And a week will be monitoring, of course, our chats. Today I'm alone in home, so not in the studio. So we are going to do a digital classroom that's all about the workflow after the photo shoot. So last time we talked about workflow, how you can incorporate stuff into your workflow and what you can do with, for example, your gear and of course also which plugins. But we still got a lot of questions about, hey, how about retouching? What do you do? How do you select your images? What is important for you in storytelling? So I thought, you know what, let's do another digital classroom where we literally going to talk about that, where we're going to show you how I retouch my images live. We're going to do something about preparation for artificial intelligence, of course, how I use it and how I think you should use it. And I'm just going to show you some cool images and my idea about it. How long will it take? I don't know. We are aiming for a full digital classroom. So in other words, about an hour to an hour and a half. And afterwards, we will chapterize it. So that means we will divide it into chapters. So I hope you guys are ready for our digital classroom. Now, at the moment, if you hear something behind me that goes like a little bit, how do you mean, breathing very heavily, that's our dog, because we literally, maybe I'm still blushing, we had a little bit of an rabbit issue. Now, what is a rabbit issue? We live in a rural area, and that means that our dog knows that there are rabbits on our area. And today he actually captured 2. Think about this. And he never did this before. So we had a little rabbit and he was playing with it. So we had to save the rabbit, of course, and we had to wait for the ambulance. Now, what is the ambulance, you might ask? Well, we have an animal ambulance over here. So we called them up and they just picked up the rabbit. It looks okay. I think they can save it, but it's one leg, doesn't look right. So for us, animals are, of course, important. So we thought, let's wait for the ambulance. And that was just before the digital classroom. So our dog is still very excited and we are still a little bit stressed. But that doesn't take away the fun of our digital classroom. Now, I have to make one thing clear. I can't see the comments at this moment. So I'm totally relying on Anouk that she will check the comments. So she will probably tell me, yes, I'm doing that in a few moments because YouTube is a little bit slower. So that means that I will be a little bit later to respond to the questions. But let's start out with our what we're going to do. So I'm going to switch over to my desktop. I'm going to transition. And this is Lightroom. Now, recently I did a workshop, and one of the things I always ask, like, hey, what do you do for your digital asset management? Or in other words, what do you do for your saving your images, your smart albums? And it still surprises me that a lot of people tell me, I don't use Lightroom. And I ask them like, hey, so you don't use Lightroom. How do you save your images? What do you do with your images? And they go like, oh, I just put it on a folder on my hard drive. Now, this is, of course, great if you trust your folders, if you trust your memory. For me, I don't trust my memory and I don't trust the folders. For me, it's important to have a system where I can find everything very easily back, but I can also do some stuff with retouching. And for me, Lightroom for years have been the hub where everything lives. It's for me the part of the workflow that's absolutely essential. Without Lightroom, I'm nowhere because I don't know where my images are. And the same with today. I had to select some images for the demo and I was going through my portfolio and going like, okay, which images do I want to show for retouching? And it's very simple. You just create a keyword, for example, retouch. And at that point, you can create a smart album. And what is a smart album? I will exactly show you that. Edit this smart collection. In Lightroom, you can create smart collections. And, oh, because I'm streaming, what's going on? Ah, there we go. It projects it on top of OBS. There we go. So you can literally just create a smart album. In this case, I'm calling it a retouch demos, where you can say match all of the following rules. Keywords contains retouch. So every image over the years that I gave the topic retouch or the keyword retouch will now be in my smart album. And this is great because when I need my portfolio to be updated very quickly, and for example, I do a workshop, I want to go exactly to the images that I like, but I don't want to go through 2001, 2002. No, I want to see the images that at one point for me were, wow, this is great. I can do that a few ways. I actually gave it the name, for example, in my smart albums. Let me see, Slideshow Studio FD, where I have all my images that I really like, These are the images that I can send to my clients. I know it's a lot. But these are all my best images. So everywhere where I stop, those are the images that I really like, all shot during workshops and events, by the way. So that's the fun part. But these are the images that have got that label. And you can do the same thing for my overig, which is, for me, it's street and travel photography. As you can see, the same thing happens. This is something I can literally just start picking out, and I don't have to go through all the years of that stuff. And in this case, exactly the same. I want to do a retouching demo, so I made a smart album called a retouch demos, and there we go. So the fun thing about this is I don't have to change my images over on location. It stays in the same location. It's just a bookmark. It literally just shows me where those images are. So when I go through this image, for example, and I say, hey, show this in Finder, it will literally show me in Finder that it's in my trips USA in 2017. So this is one of the things that I love about Lightroom. It's easy, it's fast, and it just works like a charm. So let's see what we can do within Lightroom when we start retouching. Now, you have to realize that when we go into Photoshop, we already have a retouched image. That sounds a little bit weird, but the raw files, those are the files that you can literally push around. You can add some you can add some shadow detail, you can take away some highlight clipping, and you can do your color balance. It's a raw file. Now, as soon as you go from Lightroom into Photoshop, you don't work with a raw file anymore. So from that moment on, it's a destructive workflow, unless of course you're using smart objects, but let's just keep that for now. So in Lightroom, I want to make sure that everything is okay. Now, when I'm doing workshops or I'm doing shoots on location, I'm mostly using a light meter. So that means that for me, the exposure is already right. But it doesn't mean that my images are 100% perfect to go into Photoshop. Often you want some extra contrast in your images with your lighting, but you don't want to block up all the shadows. Now, during the workshops, I often call a technique or use a technique that's called light in light, where I use my main light on my model and I use a big umbrella, for example, to fill in that light. That gives you a certain look. It takes away a little bit of the contrast, but it does give you a great contrasty look. Now, in some cases, I don't use that light in light, but that means that I know this before, and that means that in Lightroom, I can always open up those shadows. So it's a different way of working. But if you know that from the start, you know how to edit your images in Lightroom. So take that into account when you see the images. Let's start very simple. What can you do in a Lightroom? For example, when I take this shot and I go into the develop module, you can literally see what I've done. So I bumped up the contrast a lot and I changed a lot here with the clarity to give it more oomph. Now let's just reset this image and let's just see what happens. So as you can see here, it's okay. But why do I include an image like this in a retouching seminar? Well, it's not always about retouching. And this is the part where we're also going to talk about when I do the whole artificial intelligence part. It's also about storytelling. Now, when we started out with, for example, Instagram, one of my jokes was always, hey, if you mess up a shot, just Instagram the heck out of it and it will be great. Or if you miss focus, make it black and white, add a lot of contrast and noise, and you have instant art. And those are funny, of course, but there is a sense of ridiculously in there. Because let's be honest, if you just make an image black and white and add contrast, it doesn't become a great image. It becomes a black and white image with a lot of contrast. So what do you want with that image? What do you need? Oh, sorry, I dropped something. Now, what you will see is that during the time when you shoot, you will start to learn more and more about leading lines, but also about the distortion effect of, for example, your wide angle lens. And this is exactly what I'm doing here. Now, this was during a walk in the forest, probably with Chewy, just walking the dog. And sometimes there isn't anything interesting to shoot. What I love to do is just use the wide angle lens. And that can be from your phone or from your camera. Just use the wide angle lens, aim it against the tree and just aim it up. And you get an image like this. It always looks nice. Now, to make something like this more stark, what I did is just very simply just erase that contrast. As you can see here, it immediately becomes almost black and white. It isn't black and white, but it becomes almost black and white. The thing where you have to be careful for is ringing. Now, as soon as I start adding contrast, what you can see is at one point, it starts to do something weird in the small details. And you want to just back that off a little bit. And now you can always use your shadows to make it more darker, as you can see here, or a lighter, just depending on what you want. In this case, darker. And for example, you can create more contrast or take that contrast out to make it like almost like veins. And when you choose for veins, just go for a little bit of clarity in your shot. There we go. And always make sure that you check for ringing. If you see some ringing around this, it can be a little bit, well, it's okay on a monitor, but if you zoom in to 300%, well, this is okay. But what I would do in this case is just raise those highlights just a little bit. There we go. And in the end, it doesn't look a lot different, but now you lost that ringing. Now, in most cases, that ringing isn't really a problem unless people start to blow up that image or you start printing it, and then you can lose some fine detail, and then that ringing become much, much bigger of an issue. So when I sharpen an image or when I turn down that highlights or raise the shadows, I always zoom in to 100% and 300% to check that on high contrast areas, I don't see those annoying white lines because I don't want those in my image. Now, another trick that you can always do with images like this and almost with every image that you will see me doing is go all the way down in Lightroom. And as you can see here, we have something called a vignetting. Let me see. There we go. And I always like to do just a little bit of a vignette. It doesn't have to be a lot, but look at the difference. Like when you go to 0, you just add a little bit. It just immediately draws you more into that image. Now, honestly, when I look at this image, I go like the tree, for me, it's a little bit too dark. So let's go up and let's raise those shadows just a little bit. There we go. Now this is much nicer for me. Now I hope on YouTube you see the same results, but over here I can now barely see some details in the tree instead of making it totally black. Now this isn't a black and white image as you can see, this is still a color image. But by using that contrast that high and using an almost monogrammic backdrop, you get this beautiful high contrast image. And this is something I always look for when I don't see anything to shoot in nature that I find interesting. And that actually proves the point. There's always something interesting to shoot in nature if you know where to look for. Okay, let's continue. Now, one of the other things that a lot of people ask me, like, hey Frank, how does it work with the color checkers? Now, the color checkers, of course, are a totally different story because the color checkers are not really a retouching part. It's more a part about how do you get your colors correct. So I do want to show you that very quickly after the break. So if you have that question, just bear with me. That will be in this seminar. Okay, so now that we've done this, let's go for another image. And this one I shot during a trip in Denmark. And I just love the idea that there was just a boat there and it just had something for me. But when you look at the image like this, it doesn't really appeal a lot of power. It doesn't look wow. Now, the reason I'm showing you this is most of my images are shot with a color checker, a light meter, and everything is perfect. However, I never use my images like that. I always tint my images. I always do certain presets over my images that they look different. And the look is very depending on what is the story that I want to tell. How does my whole feeling of that day project in those images? But the reason I'm using that light meter and that color checker is because then all the presets works the same. So for example, if I go into my develop module over here and I go through my presets, I know by start that all the colors and all the changes that I did will be exactly the same on all the images that I retouch. In other words, this takes away a lot of the guesswork. Okay, so let's see what we can do with an image like this, and I'm not going to use one of my presets, of course. The first thing I want to make sure is how much detail do I still have left in the sky. So I'm going to lower my highlights. There we go. One of the reasons to shoot raw. Then I want to know how much shadow detail. Wow, more than enough. Now, it isn't about getting the most detail back in this shot because I actually want to make it really dark and moody, maybe make it like a ghost ship. So we're going to go into Photoshop in a moment for this. So let's make it more moody, but first let's try that with contrast and look at the difference that makes instead of using those shadows. So now lower those shadows. There we go. This is nice. And of course we can still raise and lower the highlights if we like. Add some clarity to the shot. There we go. And maybe lower the exposure. Now, as you can see, I'm not going into the local adjustments because Lightroom, as you know, also has local adjustments. So I could go into a brush, for example, and say like, hey, let's take a brush. Let's brush everything here. And then, for example, in this area, just lower my highlights. Which, of course, you can also do. But it's a choice. And in this case, because it fits within the vision that I have, I don't really see the need to do that. So let's go back for here. Let's close. Okay, let's open this up in Photoshop, Command E. So you go into Photoshop. Let's see that everything with the CPU still goes right. Yeah, no problem there. Okay, nice. Let's do it like this. Okay. Now, the first thing I want to determine is what do I want? I want a moody, dark look. So let's go into one of my favorite plugins for that. Or do you want me to see it without a plugin? Of course you want to see it without a plugin, right? So let's do that. Okay, now one of the things when I want to make it darker and more moody, I love to do the channel trick. Now what is the channel trick? Channel trick is very easy. Just do a new layer and let's call that the channel trick. Why not? And just choose your mode normal for now. Okay, now let's go back for your background. Now you have to realize something. When we look at colors and how colors work, we only see three colors: red, green, and blue. Those are the primary colors. We also have secondary colors: cyan, magenta, and yellow. And in the middle of the black body curve, we have our so-called white point, the D point. And often with photography and video, we choose D65 or 6500 degrees Kelvin. In certain areas, we choose 5500 degrees Kelvin. But if you know when to choose 55, you probably know why. If you don't know why, choose 65 because that's the main thing. And now in this case, Photoshop also uses three levels and, or sorry, three channels. And you can actually see that when you go into curves, but we're going to do that later on. So first of all, how does it work? Well, here after your layers, you can actually see a channels bar. And in the channel bar, you can literally see red, green, and blue. So let's just go for the red. Okay, that looks nice. Let's go for the green. Oh, it's cool. Let's go for the, oh, that's nice. Nice and dark. But this one is even darker. So this one is more moody. As you can see, we want that ghost ship appearance. So I think this one is cool. Press Command A, select all, and then Command C, copy. Now you can go back to RGB, that's no problem. Go for your layers and just Command V. Now you might think, Frank, you copied the black and white version on top of your color version. What are you going to do? And that's not 100% true. What I did is I copied a blue, a red, or a green channel version of my RGB image. So I already have RGB, and I'm actually adding another version of that color channel over there. Because it's black and white doesn't mean it doesn't have the information for luminance and hue. So if I blend this, so for example, if I use darken, multiply, or color burn, you can now literally see that it's a different layer than the original layer. And the one that I love to use is soft light. Now, as you can see, this immediately gives the whole image a more gritty look. And this is one of the ways that I love to work with contrast. Another way to achieve this is by using the clarity filter. Now, the thing about the clarity filter, it also gives you more oomph in your image and more contrast, but it also introduces a lot of artifacts, including those white, nasty ringing effects. And in most images, we just simply don't want those in the images because we want clear, detailed images that we can zoom in, right? We want to see that on our 8K displays. So that's why I like to do this, because now when I zoom in, as you can see here to 100%, I don't have any of those nasty things. Now, of course, zooming in will go slow. I'm keeping an eye on the CPU because this is the first time we're testing OBS. We're using new software and we used Wirecast before. I'm now testing out OBS and I want to make sure that I can retouch while streaming. And on Wirecast, we had a lot of problems with audio just getting out of sync while I was retouching. And I want to make sure that now everything works. And we also have a new laptop, of course, so that's faster. So let's see the difference. Okay, pretty cool. Let's go down. And this is something I always do, especially when streaming. I always lower my layers. And the reason I'm doing this is I don't want to go back. I now know what I've done. And normally these workflows go really fast. For example, the red channel, I actually have under an action. So I just press red channel, blue channel, or green, and it just copies everything. So if I make a mistake, I have to go back. It's just automatic steps in most cases. So let's see, I want to create a nice image and I want to create something that's mimicking a movie, like a movie look. Now, what is the thing about horror movies? They're often a little bit bluish, right? So let's start out with a blue layer. So we're going to go for a layer. I'm going to create, let's start with normal so you guys can see what's going on. I'm going to take a paint bucket and I'm going to go for a blue. I'm going to go for a nice dark blue. Okay, fill it up. And now everything is gone. And Windows would have crashed now. But don't worry, this is not the Windows crash screen. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use again a blending mode. And as you can see here, we can create something really weird and cool, or something a little bit more blown out. This reminds me of the, especially when you do it like this, and I never saw this before, so this is cool. Yep, this is it. Oh my, yes, just watch this. Let's for now do a layer, flatten image, and let's do this curves. Now probably, if you ever shot with Impossible Film, the blue version, you immediately recognize this. This is sometimes something happened that you didn't prepare for. And this is one of those moments. I didn't prepare for this. I saw it and I had to try it out. But this is literally like the Impossible Project Blue. Cool. It's an emulation of Kodak film, but then a little bit more like in the lomographic style. It looks great, but it's different. So mostly I will use soft light for something like this, or hard light if I need it over the top. But soft light is great. And then just go from 0 to hero. So I always start with 0 and then just build the effect up until I like it. There we go. As you can see, really nice. Okay. Now, let's go into something that's a little bit more with tinting. Now, we all know that we see three colors, red, green, and blue, right? I just explained that. But when you go into curves, we have exactly the same options. So when we go to curves, we also have the option for our global contrast. So for example, we can do this. But you can also go into your colors, so RGB, but you can also go into red, green, and blue. So let's try to add a little bit of a red on the bottom in the shadows and take it out in the highlights to create more of that blue contrast. There we go. Now we can do the same thing with blue, but in this case I want blue much more darker in the shadows. There we go. Don't want to disappear. And let's push that in. There we go. So let's do it before and after. Nice. So it just gives you more detail, but a slightly more tinted blue. Nice. Now, of course, we want to create something that's cooler than this. So let's go into one of my favorite filters for all the funky stuff, and that's Boris FX. Now, Boris FX is a filter which in this case I'm just going to use for the film lab, but later on we're also going to do some funky lighting effects with it. So in this case, I think we're just going to go for, yeah, I think something like this. And then just lower the opacity. There we go. Add another layer for a film stock, because you can actually stack effects, and that's so nice. And then go to film stocks and maybe add some black and white in there. Nice. As you can see, all those tiny details added together will literally give you a much nicer look. And I think for now, this is okay. We don't want to change anything more. And the cool thing is, if you don't realize it, we didn't change anything in the image. I didn't add any details. I didn't take anything out. I didn't change the context of the image. But in comparison to the original image, now I have a ghost ship. Now I have a ship that's oozing atmosphere, and that's really nice. And you can almost see it rusting before your eyes. But when you compare it to the original one, yeah, it's just a shot. And this is one of the things that I find interesting when I teach workshops. It happens a lot that people do the workshop with us, they love their images, and then they send in the images and they're not retouched. And I always go like, why? Why don't you retouch those images? For the very simple reason that out of the camera, they're just images. But as soon as you start retouching those images, that's when they become your images. That's when you put your stamp on it. That's when they are becoming literally something that you create. So let's start with something that a lot of people ask me. I've shown it a million times, but I'm going to show it 1,000,001 times because this trick somehow always helps people out. So this is a shot I took a few years ago of Nadine. And at that point, we used a lot of seamless backdrops. Now, in all honesty, there's nothing wrong with seamless backdrops. except they can be a little bit boring, and that's why I love the more scenic backdrops or the click backdrops that we use now. But as you can see here, we also have another problem in our backdrop, and that's all those nasty bumps and creases over here. So how do you get those out? Now, of course, you have software nowadays with artificial intelligence, which can create everything cool and nasty, and everything is gone. I'm not a fan of that. I'm totally honest with you guys. I love stuff with artificial intelligence, like, for example, Topaz Photo AI. I love Luminar. I love Aperty. Everything that uses artificial intelligence to make my workflow faster, I really like. Skin selection, I know how to do it, but it's just much easier if a product does it. However, as soon as you start automating your whole workflow and start adding smiles to faces, start selecting faces and brightening the eyes, making the nose different, using the backdrops, adding lights, taking... No, that's much, much too far. What I want to do is I want to create that myself. So I want to teach you also the effects that you can use yourself for this. First of all, of course, we're going to make the proper crop. And as you can see here, my crop goes everywhere. So how is that possible? Now, that's actually not that hard. Over here, you have your crop setting, and you can use ratio. Now, with ratio, it will always keep the original ratio as you can set it up here. Sorry, I'm explaining that wrong. You have to go original ratio, sorry. So with the original ratio, you're always holding your ratio, and you can even just make it in a landscape or portrait, as you can see here. Now, as soon as you change to a normal ratio, that's the moment where you can just freely move your crop around. So in this case, because we don't care about ratio, I'm just going to move my crop, and I'm just going to show you what artificial intelligence nowadays can do. But by saying that, if I make my crop, I'm actually taking out stuff, right? Let's not do that. Let's, for now, cancel the whole crop. There we go. Let's see what artificial intelligence actually can do. So I want to flatten my backdrop. I want to make sure that my backdrop looks nice. But first, let's make sure that the backdrop is all over the whole image. Now, generative fill, I'm not going to fill in anything. I'm just going to go generate. What you will find out with generative fill is often it works great if you don't type in anything. I've used it for hairs, for skin, for a lot of stuff, and it just does a great job. Now, in the past, I would actually select a part and just extend it, but nowadays with artificial intelligence, let's be honest, it works great. So how did I do it in the past? Very simple. Let's first do a flatten image. In the past, I would just select as much as possible of the backdrop without hitting my model. As you can see here, I would move my selection over here. There we go. And then I would just go Edit, Transform, and then Scale. And hold the Shift button, and there you go. You just take the problem out, and I do the same thing for the bottom part. It works like a charm, and nothing wrong with it. However, nowadays, if you have not a lot of space to move that around, or you don't want to stretch anything, as you can see now, artificial intelligence works like a charm, and it's really nice and fast. So I'm doing the same thing here, just using generative fill and just generate. I think he is done with playing and now sleeping, our dog. Okay, it looks nice, but of course I still want to do the crop. But for example, by the way, now I could actually choose without any problem to go for original ratio and just make the perfect crop. Or composition in this case, of course. There we go. Nice. Okay, so how do we clean that backdrop? Well, first of all, let's start out with an empty, with a flattened image. Nowadays, I will just do a select subject. It will probably select the subject perfectly. There we go. Now, you have to make sure, and I'm not going to do it for the broadcast, but normally you zoom in to 100%, and you have to make sure that nothing of the model is selected. Now, as you can see here, that's pretty hard to see, right? Because you all see those marching ends, and here we already see a problem. So in that case, just go here to the European Union flag. That's just kidding. Press it, and now you have your quick mask. Take your brush, and you don't have to be nice. You have to make sure that nothing is selected. So if I go like this, that's more than okay. No problem at all. So you don't have to do a 100% like here. Don't worry about that. But this, Yes, worry about that. Oh, that selection is pretty good, so you don't have to go over it. There we go. That's a little bit. Here you can see some. This is okay, but let's make sure. There we go. Okay, this is all good. Here we have some. And again, it doesn't matter that you're sloppy. Just make sure that nothing of the model is selected. Often I even do an expand after I did my selection to make sure that nothing is selected. And the reason for this is we're going to use a pretty heavy blur in a moment. And if you have selected something from your model, you will find out that that will influence the blur and it will create something that doesn't look nice and will immediately go like, hey, this is a photo that was photoshopped. Okay, this looks good enough for now. So let's take this one. Oh, that's nothing there. Oh, and by the way, if you wonder like, hey, what color should I use? Black or white? What is take away or show? There's only two options. Matt Klaskowski said that once and it was a genius. Don't worry about it. Press X. If black doesn't work, white will. So some people try to remember everything. That's not necessary. If black doesn't work, white will. Okay, so there we go. Press the flag again. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut my model. But before I'm doing that, I'm going to make a safety copy. So I'm going to copy my backdrop. Okay. I'm going to say edit, cut my model. And I'm going to immediately paste my model back, paste into place. I'm going to go back to this layer and I'm going to go for filter blur. I'm going to go for Gaussian blur. And now if I've done a right selection, everything will look nice. However, you have to be careful. You don't want to overdo this. I see a lot of people going like, okay, let's blur the heck out of it. We set up that lighting for a reason with the backdrop with a nice round circle. If you blur the heck out of it, that circle is gone. You are destroying your image and it looks very much glued on. Seamless should be seamless, but you can see some lighting effects on it, of course. You can see some creases. That's not a problem. You just want to make it nicer. And when I look at this, this looks not nice. But when I go a little bit up, there we go. Just go down. Oh, sorry. There we go. So now I can see it. And now they're gone. Now on the bottom, it still looks pretty nasty. So that's something we're going to do in a moment. Now, when you're shooting this against blue, it's okay. But when you shoot it against gray, you have a huge problem. And maybe you can also see it in the blue. That's why I choose this one. Yeah, here I can see it. I hope you can see it on YouTube too. We have all these lines over here, and those look horrible. Now, the same thing happens when you shoot, for example, with a very, very cheap JPEG camera. And you shoot JPEG and you see the skies and you see all that bending in the sky. And you go like, why? They compress too much. So that's why you have those bendings. Now, sometimes you can't do anything about it. But if you see those micro bendings, that's often not compression, but it's just simply the camera isn't good enough to show you those smooth gradients. Now, because I'm blurring this, it might be that on your monitor or my monitor, I can still see it nicely, but when you zoom in, you can still see those lines, as I can see now. There's one very simple trick to solve this. Go to Filter, go to Noise, go to Add Noise, and don't go for this, of course, but make sure you go for Gaussian and monogrammatic, and then just go for 1%. As you can see, you don't see the noise. Now again, I hope you see this on YouTube, probably not, but when I turn this on and off, I don't see any noise disappearing or appearing, but I do see those lines disappearing and appearing. And especially when you shoot this against gray seamless or against these areas where you can see that light fall off, this is a huge problem. And this is so easily solved. So as you can see now, we have a perfect backdrop. If I change it over, you can see that this one was a little bit more nasty. The only problem is the floor. I still think that in the floor we need to see some grease and some problems. So let's add a layer mask. Layer mask. Let's do a reveal all, show everything. Let's take that big brush. Let's make it really large. And in this case, we're not going to go for 100%, but I'm going to go all the way down to 29% or 30%. And I'm just going to paint over the floor. And again, if white doesn't work, press X and you have black, and black will work. And there we go. This looks a lot nicer than before. And the only problem is, and this is why you should always check your selection, it doesn't matter if you make it rough, but as you can see here, Here you can see a little bit of a blur, and that's because I didn't select this part. So with dresses like this, be careful, but overall, as you can see here, I was very rough around these selections. They look absolutely fine. You can even see the hairs here, and this is because we are blurring, but, and this is the most important part, I still have my original backdrop. As soon as I take that one out, that's because, well, the blur will show you fine detail. If I take the backdrop out, that's where everything disappears because you are blurring it. So that's why it's vital to keep that backdrop behind your original image. As you can see here, we have 3 layers. One layer is just a model. Let's go to 100% with a very rough selection, as you can see here. Then we have that layer with just a blurred backdrop and the faded out bottom. And we have the original image, and all blend together create, in my opinion, a much nicer solution than what AI does, because now I have total control over what I can do, and I'm not depending on the machine going like, hey, we have to do that. Now, in all honesty, the selection takes a little bit more time, as you can see here, but you can also clone this out very easily. But I just like to be able at least to do it also myself instead of relying on a plugin. Okay, let's have some more fun. Now, one of the things that I, of course, love to use artificial intelligence to be more creative in my images. So let's start out very simple. The first thing we want to do is, for example, use artificial intelligence to change the sky. Well, there are many software issues for this, so let's just try out how it works. In all honesty, I didn't do it with this image yet, but I want to show you something else with this image. Now, with this image is on Times Square in New York. We had Nadine climbing up a lighting pole or a traffic pole. And we did use strobes, but sometimes strobes fire, sometimes they don't. Now, this is one of those moments where I was firing too fast, but I just loved the pose, and the strobe didn't recycle 100%. Luckily, we had some shutter settings that were compatible, so it didn't blow out too much. It wasn't too dark, so I can still save the image. And because the other ones were with strobes, this is also a totally different image. So you could also tell your client like, hey, all the other ones were with strobes. This one is special. So maybe why not? So let's go into the develop module and let's do first some shadows because I want to make sure that I know what's there. Nice. Let's take out some of the highlights, and that doesn't matter with this image. So just get them up to get some oomph in the shot. Add some contrast. There we go. And now I want to make sure that I see my model. And this is one of the things that I don't like about Lightroom. If I go into my vignette, I didn't find a way yet to adjust my vignette the way that I like it. I want it on my subject. And of course I can do a local adjustment layer, or I can use gradients, but I would love to be able to also do it with the vignette. And I know that this part is actually used to take out the light fall off in the lenses, but because it looks so natural, I'm using it actually to add that effect to my images. So let's go into Photoshop and let's show you another plugin of mine that I really like. And the first thing, of course, that we want to do is we want to make sure that the attention of the viewer goes immediately towards my model. Let's see. Takes a while. There we go. Okay, cool. So let's go into my first filter, and that's Skylum Aperty for the skin. Now, in this case, in all honesty, you don't really need a lot of skin retouching, but I just want to show you the filter because it's absolutely awesome. Now let's go to 100%. Now, this is the new Aperty, and Aperty is a filter by Skylum. You probably know that from Luminar and Neo. And this filter is aimed specially for the portrait photographers. So you can do skin retouching, blemish removal. And when I demonstrated it the first time, my only problem with it was it didn't do skin retouching on the whole body, only on the face. And they actually changed that now, so now you can also do the full body. Now, as mentioned before, you don't really need skin retouching here. And today it isn't about skin retouching because I already showed you that in the previous episode. But I did want to bring aperture under the attention again because I just love the software so much. As you can see here. As mentioned before, I don't really need it in this image, but it just cleans up the skin a little bit. And that's the thing that I like. As you can see, moving it around, it hardly changes anything. And that's what I love about skin retouching. I don't want those overly sharpened images where you see a lot of detail, but I also don't want those overly softened images. I still want to see that my model is a human being with normal skin. And somehow Aperty and also Luminar Neo does this really well. So let's just for now apply this. And let's see if I can call up my browser, if I can see some comments. Okay, somebody said that the volume is soft, and that's weird because the volume here is on full blast, and I also see it on full power here coming in. So that's okay. If the volume is low, just raise the volume. Okay, let's go into a Luminar Neo. And we have Luminar AI and Luminar Neo. Now, Luminar AI, I don't know if they still support it, but at the moment, I'm only using Luminar Neo. Luminar AI had some stuff that was better than Luminar Neo, but after the last updates, it's all Luminar Neo. So if you are in the market, we have a discount page on our website where you can get some discounts for Luminar, and I will leave them also in the comments below. Okay, of course we can go into presets, and I have a lot of presets here. The thing that I have to warn you for Luminar, and that's, again, I'm very honest with this kind of stuff, is it has to load all those presets, as you can see here, and that just takes a hell of a lot of time. And this is the thing that I really have to improve on. Now, of course, you can click on a preset and see it immediately, but this is just, I would love to just go over it and not wait for it to build it. But for now, we're just going to build a preset. So let's go for edit. Now, by the way, I've chosen a preset somehow. Always cool. And when you choose a preset, you can always go into edit and you can see the whole edits as you can see here. So for now, let's discard it. There we go, tools. Okay, with Luminar, you have to realize that you can stack everything on top of each other. And that's the thing that I love. Now, with normal software, like for example, Capture One, or I don't know about DxO, still have to test that one out one day. But with Capture One, Lightroom, you have sliders and that's it. You move the sliders and literally you move the sliders, right? Now with Luminar, they did something that's really interesting, and it's a little bit comparison to doing the first time video editing on DaVinci Resolve. Now, I'm a big Premiere lover and Final Cut Pro, but I did experiment with DaVinci Resolve, and the thing that I liked was they think about editing differently. Where all normal editing software thinks about clip, clip, and a clip in the middle, somehow DaVinci did it like this: clip, clip, a clip underneath. So you can move the clips around, and they do this all the time. So you don't have to find perfect moments again. You only have to find perfect keyframes. You can just stand on the clip and move that clip around. And that's something that I find also interesting in Luminar Neo, what they do. You can add something like, for example, a filter, then go through your whole workflow and then add another instance of that filter. And that gives you so much creativity and so much flexibility in your workflow. That's just amazingly handy. So let's start with develop. Now, in my case, the thing that I like about develop is the smart contrast. I'm not using anything else because I already did that, but the smart contrast, as you can see here, just immediately gives that image a nice oomph and pop. I'm gonna capture a little bit back from the highlights if possible. In this case, no, and maybe add some shadow detail, but not too much, just enough. There we go. We can still do everything like optics, noise reduction, sharpness, color, but in this case, I don't need it anymore. So let's see before and after. Very, very nice. Let's go down. Let's give it some structure where you can just boost. As you can see here, that's more like a total sharpness. You can also do more or less. This reminds me a lot about the old LucasArt. LucasArt was a plugin. The first time that I used it, everybody was going like, how the heck did you get that look? Because it was something totally unique. And nowadays, and a lot of people used it, by the way, at that point. I didn't invent it, and I certainly wasn't the first one using it. But on the forums where I visited, I was one of the first, I think, that used it. Because it was also horrendously expensive. Now, as you can see here, and just look at the details in, for example, here, the metal and the car. As soon as I boost that less or more, as you can see, no artifacts, but it just gives you a beautiful blur, which I absolutely don't like, but so much more sharpness. And now comes the kicker. As you can see here, I have got a lot of black detail back. go into your edits and, as you had already guessed, develop and just lower those shadows. Now, this is again one of the parts that I don't like about Luminar. I have to activate the structure again to see what I've done. And I would love to be able to use this as active and then go back here and change it while I was watching my whole workflow. And this is the only part, but that's a small part that I don't like. So, okay, so this is nice. Now I want to make sure that my attention goes to my model. So let's go for a very nice vignette. Let me see, vignetting. Let's first go for a lot so I know what I'm doing. And now I can choose my subject. And this is really nice. Choose my subject. There we go. I'm always overdoing it first, because then I know exactly where I place my spots. There we go. And then, of course, you just open up. And talk about having a lot of options here. Nice. I always go before and after. There we go. Gives you just a nice look inside, or more aimed towards your model. So I mean inside the shot, you just get more, no English as native tongue, right? You are drawn more towards your center of attention. That's what I meant. You are drawn more into the shot. There we go. So the vignetting on and off, huge difference. Now, of course, you can choose to make the red jump out more, but in this case, I'm just going for a look in my shot. So I'm actually going down. And one of the things that I like about Luminar is that it has some really nice mood settings. And mood settings works via LUTs. And LUTs, compare it a little bit to presets, but slightly different. Go for cinematic toning, and often there's something that I really like. For example, this one. Let's go for a little bit more, more creative maybe. I wanted red to jump out just slightly more, but also give it more like a cartoon look. There we go. This I really like. Give it some more saturation, some extra contrast. And there we go. Now, I don't mind that the face is getting really light. This is actually something that I love about this look, because it's now more like a comic. But we talked about replacing the sky, remember? And I totally forgot about that one. Now, as mentioned before, this retouch session is more about how do I change my images, and this is what I do. I normally don't change the sky, but because I said I will try it, I have to try it, right? So let's replace the sky. And I think it's not going to work because the sky is totally white, but let's see how smart it is. It would surprise me if it does it 100%, by the way. Oh, wow. I take back everything I just said, like every word. I'm not going to say I'm going to use this a lot, but wow. That was something I didn't expect, that it would be this good. Yeah. Wow. I actually like this one a lot. Let's see if they have more options, like more. This is more natural, of course, for this setting. There we go. That's much better. And again, I don't like that over the top stuff, but in all honesty, let's be honest, I wouldn't have any problem with doing this, but look at this. Do you see that it's going wrong here? In the poll. But hey, in Dutch we would say kniesoor wie daarop let. In other words, if you notice that one, you are very, very good. So overall, yeah, I think the sky replacements works great. So let's cancel this one and let's do the next one. Yes. Okay. Now for the next one, I'm going to change over very quickly to this camera. Now, of course, the color checker is one of the most important things in your photo shoot, right? Because we want to make sure that everything looks right. So I'm going to find one for the color checker very quickly. I forgot to put that one in the retouching seminar, so I have to do that very quickly now. Let's see, I shot one with our last setup. So let's put that one in we go. Let's give it the keyword retouch. And I know you can't see it anymore, but that's intentional. Let's go down to the retouch project. There we go. Okay, now it's in there. Okay, let's switch back. Cool. We're working on some images for a client, so. Okay, let's open this one up. Now, I have to be honest, like most cases when you want to work with the color checker, I highly recommend doing a crop. So, in this case, this was, by the way, shot during the workshop Filmic Images. If you think like, hey, Frank, this looks really weird, it does until you see it in context. And this was more like a scene from a sci-fi movie where somebody was fighting in a nice cinema looking scene. So you don't see the rest of the scene. But when you look online in a few days, or if this is later on, you go back into my portfolio around this date, you can see the images from this shoot. And they are absolutely awesome. But for now, let's focus on the color checker. I'm going to go to my develop module, and I'm going to crop it until I see the color checker totally in the image. So in this case, let's do it like this. Let's go. And this will be more than enough. There we go. Now I have the attention or the, how do you call that? I always do a white balance check. So as you can see here, I always find one of those squares. And of course, you can also use the color checker part on the bottom, which is actually designed to do a white balance. But this one works just as fine. And after I've done this, go to File, go for Export. And then you have to do a very simple export for X-Rite, color checker camera passport. And now what you do is you give it a name. Doesn't matter which name, as long as you can recognize it back. You find export, and after that, the computer will say, hey, restart Lightroom. And now comes the fun part. Where is it, right? Because where do you find that preset? And a lot of people think like, hey, this is it. Now it's done, right? No, it isn't. As soon as you open up this image again, so let's say this is the image, you go into Lightroom and you go here for the 4 squares, as you can see here. Now you can see Adobe Color, and you can see that everything changes the color checker. You can see profiles, camera matching, for example, VL, in, PT, I don't know what they all mean, but they all look different. And somewhere underneath, you can also find your own, and that's under profiles. For example, my Gigoto strokes, my GT200, and as you can see, the Gigotos are pretty solid. This is, of course, more like the GT200, and this is the 400. A little bit of a difference in the blue, but that's all okay. As soon as we go to the flash benders, they're also pretty color accurate. Again, a little bit in the blues, but overall it works great. Now in this case, I'm using just the Gigoto strobe, so I'm gonna select this one, and then you press close. Now you set up your camera correctly for the colors. The only thing you now have to do is select all the images from that same shoot. So let's say this one is okay. I always, again, it's just nature of me. I don't know why I do it. I always do another white balance. I highly recommend doing that too. And then just select all the images from that shoot. Go for sync. And then what you could do, because you didn't do anything yet, is just select all and just sync. But most of the time, it's more than enough to go for white balance, treatment, and profile. And at that point, you get most of the stuff over. I would also include, for example, calibration, lens blur, in all honesty, lens corrections. It's the stuff that you want in all those images to be the same. So you don't want contrast, exposure. You don't want your, how do you call it, your local adjustments. You don't want any artificial intelligence in there, but your basic, like lens corrections, that should be all copied to the other one. So you can set it up in Lightroom like that. Okay, so that's how the color checker works. Now let's go for, this was in exactly the same setup, only here we're using holographic material. And I want to show you what you can do in a very simple setup in Luminar to get this even more oomph and intensity. So let's go into Photoshop. Now the whole idea was to make a setup where we use a red strobe on one side, a blue strobe on the other one, and using a nice focused light beam on our model, and just create something that just flickers and shines and has all these sparks everywhere. As you can see, it works pretty well. Now, in the end, I didn't really like those curtains here. I was going like, I don't know, they have a lot of, I tried to get this out and it just didn't work. Now, the nice thing about Photoshop AI at this moment is, of course, that you can just select this. And in most cases, as mentioned before, you just press generative fill and it will find out what happens. Now, of course, this is a live stream, so I would bet it would do totally wrong. But when I did it, the second guess was 100% spot on and it worked. So let's see what happens. There we go, more than enough for the stream. So let's do the same thing here. And you can do the same thing again, generative fill. You can also type something in, but in most cases I just leave it open and it just figures it out by itself. Let me see. You can always choose for a different one because I don't like the top. Yeah, I don't like that at all. For now, just leave it like this. You know, for this, it's good enough. I'm gonna crop it slightly. There we go, good enough. Okay, let's go into my plugin which I'm going to use for this, and that's actually first I'm going to use the Skylum software, Lumina Neo. And Lumina Neo has something called Magic Light. Now, what is Magic Light, boys and girls? Magic Light is something that it adds to the image and it creates a nice star effect. Now, I have to be totally honest with you guys. I am normally totally staying away from this kind of stuff for the very simple reason I'm the kind of photographer that love to do it in camera. In other words, if it's not there in the camera, I don't want to edit in Photoshop. However, over the years, of course, artificial intelligence comes here, the plugins are getting better, everything is getting better. So over the years, I have changed my mind a little bit and going like, okay, maybe if it wasn't in there, maybe we should just put it in there because, and then I was always going, no, I'm not going to do that because it wasn't in there and it doesn't look right. The thing that I did start to do sometimes a little bit is if I already shot a lens flare and it looks awesome, but the pose was a little bit off, and then in the next shot, the lens flare wasn't that awesome, but the pose was absolutely amazing and everything looks right, I will use Boris FX to just add a little bit of lens flare in there. And I kid you not, you cannot see the difference for the very simple reason it was shot that way. It was intended that way, so all the lighting was there. And that's why I don't have a lot of problems, although I won't use it myself, with the filter I'm going to show you now. And it's actually absolutely awesome if you see it in action. So let's go for edit and let's go for the magic light. And let's just go for the intensity. Look at that. It just enhances the highlights. Look at that. So go for the intensity. And it will first find it out itself, but you can also, for example, say, okay, brush it in this area. I want this to be more like a star effect. And I want here more stars. Maybe I want this to shine and this. And of course, because I love the effect, we're gonna do it here. Now, of course, now I don't like it there, so let's go back for that one. There we go. As you can see here, now it just gives you more oomph in that shot. And in all honesty, it's not that, don't do it like this, of course, but if you just do it very subtle, yeah, I think it looks nice. It doesn't really look 100% natural, but I think this one takes it away. I think this one, if you do it on the brighter areas, I think this is really nice. Okay, let's do apply, and let's go for Boris FX for the real work. Now, as mentioned before, I used a blue strobe and a red strobe on each side. So that means that I can literally fake my lens flares now because I took the curtains out. I don't really like the effect anymore. I'm going like, ooh, I really liked it before with the blue and the red. It's still a little bit there. Oh, don't do that. So I want to add that effect. So let's do that. So let's go for lighting and let's go for a lens flare, but not do it as a lens flare. Let's add it over here. I always have to find the effect. There we go. Aim the effect down. And in this case, I was using, I think on that side it was blue. There we go. Let's go, okay. Nice. As you can see now, my lens flare is back. That's cool. Add another layer, so you can stack effects also here. Add again a lens flare. Place the lens flare on top. And grab the holder, aim it down. And in this case, I was using a red on that side. So I'm going to add my red. There we go. Add a new layer. And for the new layer, I'm going to go for a film lab. Now, I hear some of you guys going, oh, Frank, I don't like this. I don't like that. It looks horrible. Okay, no problem. Let's go for the lens flare first here. As you can see here, we have an array brightness, a hotspot brightness, and an outer brightness. Now, the outer brightness is actually what you don't like, probably. So as you can see here, I can just take that out. And I can do the same thing here with that lens flare. I can also take the outer brightness down or up, depending on what you like. And I would take it out probably. And just aim it slightly higher. You can make it larger or smaller. I love this software. It's really fine to tinker around with your images, if you know what I mean. So in this case, let's go for Film Lab for the look. Also here you can choose your opacity of the look. And in this case, I already like what I see. That would be too easy. This is a little bit too harsh. Oh, this is really nice. And let's just lower that a little bit. There we go. Now, as you can see here, if I do apply, Boris FX is pretty fast. Overall, I think Boris FX is one of those software packages where you go for your creative ideas. If you overdo it, it's wonderful if you like that idea. But for me, if I overdo it, it just looks fake. So that's where our next part is about. We're going to fake the shit out of everything. So this is the part that I really like. And this is also the part that terrifies me. So that's why this is in the end. It's far from the end, but I can always cut this out if it goes wrong. So let's start with this one. I totally messed this shot up. It was very, very hot. I guess around 35 degrees. They told me it was a darker area. It was totally not dark. It was very, very bright. Everybody was sweating their pants off. It was terrible. But I did like this shot. But when I looked at it on the monitor, it looked great, but it just didn't convince me. And I messed up. I didn't trust the light meter, and I did some adjustments that on the monitor it looked great. I saw the image coming in at home and I was going like, what did I do? Trust that light meter. I tell it everybody, why didn't I do it? Can we save the image? Yes, we can. Of course, we can open up the shadows. And because the face is underexposed, actually, I can also open up the exposure, slightly lower my highlights to get my contrast back in my model, add slightly contrast. Now, in the past, there was a trick where you could actually type in 150. Nowadays, that doesn't work anymore. That's a shame. I will change my color balance slightly on I, because, hey, we're going to change the image anyway. There we go. Maybe add some clarity. And a little bit of structure. Okay, already looks better. But let's go into Photoshop. Now, as mentioned before, I love that filter Boris FX and Luminar. So I'm going to use those two together to create something that looks a lot better than I'm seeing now. And I'm trying to not use any artificial intelligence for this shot. Now, what I like is the whole composition. Now, normally I like my model to be on the right side of the frame and that you have a lot of negative, I used to call it positive space, on the left side. That just gives you a nice, easy way to look. Now, in this case, it didn't really work out on location, what I remember, because there was a lot of junk over there and I had to aim that camera that way to make sure that I got the whole machine in. The problem was that the composition didn't really work 100%, as you can see here. So I choose to do it slightly different than normal and create a darker side and then create all the accents and also the pose of Nadine on that side to try to save the image. In the end, okay, but not 100% perfect. However, if I change my composition and crop slightly, as you can see here, I can create a more balanced shot. This I like a lot more. It's still not perfect, and I'm not going to get it perfect because I don't want to use AI and extending my backdrops, but this looks better. Now, what I want to do is I want to create something that gives me almost like from a movie set. So I want to get more detail in, for example, the metal. And we already saw that I'm using a filter for that called Luminar Neo. And we're going to go right into Luminar Neo again. Now, if you expected me to use a lot of expensive plugins and a lot of extra stuff, that's not how I teach. That's not my own workflow. And when I teach, I want to teach you my workflow. I don't want to sell you stuff. In essence, you don't need a lot of plugins. If you buy, for example, Aperture, if you do a lot of portrait work, that's great. You can do whatever you want. You can even create color presets. This is the same thing I'm doing now. But if you go like, okay, I sometimes need to do retouching of skin, but I love to work with presets, replacing skies, then get Luminar Neo. If you use mainly skin, or you can use both, use Aperty. So those two, I think Neo is more the all-round, Aperty is really aimed at skin work. But also does a lot of the other stuff, by the way, as you saw in the previous episode, even some funky lighting effects. Okay, let's go for edit. And the first thing I want to do is that boost. So let's find my boost. Sorry, I'm messing up. Details. Sorry, structure. There we go. There we go. Really nice. And again, as you can see, it hardly affects the skin. Now, when I do this with clarity, like you saw in Lightroom, it really gives you a nasty look in the image. And that's not against Lightroom. It's just a different way of using it. This is not called clarity. This is called boost. Clarity does exactly what it needs to do. But if you use it for sharpening and giving that nice oomph in your shot and that more like Luce's art idea from the past, that's where I think boost and structure comes in way better than clarity. Clarity is more like an axe. It does its work, it cuts through, but it doesn't need, sometimes you need the scalpel to make it really nice. As you can see here. This is a huge difference. And the skin is unaffected, as you can see here. So I don't know how it does it, but somehow it always hits the spot for me and it always works perfectly. Almost always. Okay, now let's go for the skin. Because Neo also has skin retouching, so go for skin. And in all honesty, I always do it in 100% because it's not really a skin retouching software. And most of the time, I do like the effect on 100%. And again, that's the cool thing. If I go to face and then back to skin, you can see it's on 0. How is that possible? I just set it on 100. If you go to face and you go back to skin, it's on 0. I just set it on 100, right? Let's do it again, 100. Yeah, that's what I mentioned before. Go into edits. And now you can see that I actually stacked the skin effect. So don't do that. Just edit once. But sometimes you need to boost something and just add it together because sometimes 50/50 is better than 100, if you know what I mean. If you set it on 50, it doesn't introduce any artifacts. Then use another one on 50 and combine those two can get a nicer, cleaner results than just boosting it to 100%. Not with all settings, but sometimes that really helps. So experiment with that. Now, in this case, I think the face is a little bit underexposed. And this is also something I love about Luminar. You have your face light. There we go. Just add some face light. And in this case, let's overdo it. You can do something with the eyes. Now, this is not my thing. And the mouth, again, this is, sometimes I will use an iris flare a little bit or eye widening, but most of the time, no. That's the makeup artist's job or the model itself. Okay, let's go for a slide vignette. There we go. So select my subject. Really nice. Go for my mood. Oh, I like that a little blue tint in there. Wow. Just boost that. There we go. Add some, or take away some contrast and add some saturation. Oh, wow. This is really nice. There we go. And press apply. Now, in all honesty, I'm totally satisfied with the shot. I really like it. And then I look at it and I go like, oh no, oh no, that terrible lens flare over there. Oh my, that looks, it just takes away everything that I like about the shot, right? It just doesn't look right. Now, I promised you guys that I wouldn't use any artificial intelligence, so I'm not going to do it. But if you want, of course, oh, sorry, of course, you can just go and use generative fill. Yes, and it takes it out. But for now, let's see if we can do something that's nicer and actually mimics it more. So let's go for optics. Let's go for no. Let's go for lighting. Let's go for lens flare. And just place it spot in the middle here. There we go. Change the color to a red. As you can see here, I can still see my original lens flare. So this is not what I want, although I changed the color. But as you can see here, they have a lot more options. And without any doubt, there will be one, especially when you go to the redder ones, that will fit 100% perfectly. Oh, that's nice. There we go. I really like this one. And again, you can move this around. And maybe you don't like those angles, or you want them less or more. You can always change it. You can, for example, do this. And of course, you can also change your, let me see, your rays. So you can do more or less. And of course, you can change the luminosity. But I think if you want to mimic that effect, this is great. There you go. Now, if you think, oh, the effect is too large, I don't want it to be spilling overall, just change it to slightly smaller. Place it straight in the middle of your original one, so it overlaps slightly, and there you go. Now, of course, if you go like, hey, I really like it with the lens flaring, but now I would love to see it with a slight extra tint. That's the cool thing about software. You can always stack effects. So let's go for looks, for example, film looks. And let's say you want it with a nice darker look. Let's go for 0. And let's add, and I said, I love that blue in there. Look at that. Very, very subtle. I hope you can see it on YouTube. But it just cools down the reds a little bit, which I absolutely love. So when I go for apply, now I have a nicer lens flare. It's still in there because it originally was in there. But it now, for my idea, it just looks nicer and better. Look at the difference. As soon as it starts, there we go. For me, the lens flare was there, so I feel absolutely fine edited. Nobody will actually see that it's fake because you can see it here, you can see it overblowing here, you can see it on the sides. If there was no lens flare there, how would the light come here? How would this shine and bright up? So it just fits together. And that's what we're going to talk about now. Because this is fixing something. I'm now going to talk about something that I shot and I'm trying to fix or create something that's interesting, but it just doesn't work or it will never work. Now, sometimes you shoot an image and you're totally happy with it. Like, for example, this one in New York on the Brooklyn Bridge. Absolutely love it. And be smart if you shoot something like this. Make sure that if you have public or people walking there, you don't want to see those people, position something in front of it. Like in this case, the dress is blocking some of the tourists, but we can still see people here. So in this case, I'm going to use artificial intelligence to take them out. And that's the nice thing. So make the selection nice. And here we go. Do generative fill. And there we go. Takes a while, of course. It's not 100% perfect, of course, but if you don't know any better, okay, that's better. Yeah, I'm thinking I'm going to choose this one. And I don't think there was anybody else in the frame, right? No. Okay, for what I want to show, this is good enough. let's give it some oomph. Oh, yeah. I have to do first, of course, my flatten image. Now, of course, you can do this, or, which I prefer, I always like to do this more. It just makes it pop a little bit more. Okay, now, with artificial intelligence, you could, of course, go like, hey, let's go all out. Let's create a futuristic scene. So let's select our backdrop. Let's do, for example, this, and let's create a futuristic cityscape. Futuristic cityscape with neon. I hope I wrote that correctly. Futuristic. I don't know. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one because you will already guess this will not work, or you have to tinker around a lot with the images. And overall, okay, and of course, the moment I say it won't work, it creates something that looks okay. That's always my luck. But okay, so okay, this looks okay. But the story I want to tell you is actually you can, with artificial intelligence, create something that's nice, but it will never fit together like it should fit together. Like, for example, hey, this was shot this way, and the person that looks at the image totally believes it. So, how do you do something like that? Well, I'm not a big compositor and retoucher, so for me, it's always like when I see something that other people do, I always go like, "Oh, that's way better than I do it." I always try to hide myself behind the fact that, oh, I'm just doing it for fun and I'm doing it more, how do you call it, surrealistic. So I'm not trying it realistic. So when I shot the cosplay workshop with Jamila, the idea was to create an effect of, how is she called, Lara Croft, Tomb Raider. So we shot it with our click backdrops. I'm going to open the exposure a little bit so you can see it. We used our click backdrops in the back because I didn't know what I want to do. In my mind, I had this idea of Lara Croft in a German bunker during World War II, maybe totally out of the context, and trying to get out with all snakes on the floor. And of course, you want to make sure that something like that looks believable, although you know you're going to use artificial intelligence. So I was going like, okay, if I don't like the idea of that bunker, if I can't pull that off, so that she's pulling herself out of that bunker, I want a light beam from the top down. What if I can't pull that off? Then I have to have a reality check with myself. What can I pull off? Well, flowers in the back, that's no problem at all. We can always create something where, for example, she's trying to get away from a museum or a big painting or whatnot more. So with that idea, we choose the backdrop that you see here because it just looks nice. It fits nicely with our model. We can remove it. We don't have to remove it. And even without any artificial intelligence, it probably already looked nice if she was just standing in front of it. The problem was, of course, if she just stands in front of it, it doesn't tell a story. It doesn't give you that idea of, hey, she has to escape, she has to climb up. So we used the background system with a holder and a whip. And she just put the whip on top. And I just told her like, okay, when I say yes, stand on your toes and feel like you're pulling yourself up. That's everything that you see here. So let's go into Photoshop and let's see what we can do with something like this now that we prepared it. And after that, I'm going to show you one more shot where we prepared everything. And then you will see how incredibly easy it becomes if you prepare your shots for artificial intelligence. Because I do think there's a huge market for using artificial intelligence in your shots if you do it creative. And I didn't want to prepare anything like, hey, Frank already prepared something, so I'm literally going to take everything out the way that you see it. In this case, I'm just going to use content aware fill because, hey, it's still there and it doesn't cost you any credits. So let's use content aware fill for some parts. There we go. Okay, now we still have the top part, and for this moment I'm just going to leave it like this because maybe it looks nice. But first of all, we want to make sure that we expand our horizon. Now, as mentioned before, standard Photoshop will do this with your crop tool. So go here, go for your, not just go for normal ratio. I'm going to extend my canvas to here. I'm going to extend the canvas to here. And I'm just going to let Photoshop decide on what it can do. I can also type in concrete walls. Let's do that. Let's do Alt, crumbled, concrete, bunker walls. Never know what's going to happen. The thing is, I always think in my mind that it looks to the backdrop it already sees and then creates something nice. And otherwise, it's too scary, the whole artificial intelligence, because sometimes it creates stuff where you go like, wow, how did it do that? Huh, okay, that's also cool. Sure. I don't know what I did wrong, but somehow sometimes Photoshop thinks I type in weird names. So let's do it like this. Old concrete wall in the dark. Maybe that works. And any week doesn't come with any questions, so I guess there aren't any questions, so that's always cool. And again, no. Ah, that's a shame. Let's see what happens if I don't type in anything. Of course, we tested this slightly before the broadcast and everything worked nicely, but that moment I didn't type in anything for the expand. Tja, unbelievable. Okay, never mind. Let's quit that for now. I don't know why Photoshop is doing this to me. Okay. Of course, he has to climb out of something. So I'm going to create on top.
Is this your last picture, Frank?
Almost. Why?
Okay, nou, sorry, moet plassen.
Okay, just go. Just create concrete roof with a trap door seen from below, of course. The generating always takes a little while, so sorry guys, and I'm also streaming at the meantime. I am gonna cut some corners. I don't know what's going on here. This is really weird. Let's try something else just for fun. Let's do snakes. I could have an internet problem maybe, because this never happened before, that everything what I do results in orange blocks. Okay, that works. Okay, so that's why we started to build snakes. I'm just gonna continue like nothing happens. There we go. And if you go to my portfolio under the heroes and villains, you can actually see the image that we eventually ended up with. And I think it looks pretty cool and convincing. So I just wanted some snakes on the floor, and as you can see here, the snakes look pretty cool. Now, at that point, I think artificial intelligence was just into Photoshop, and sometimes snakes resulted in something really weird. So normally, just build it up like crazy. I'm going to try it one more time to see if it maybe, because I didn't select something. So let's do this. Okay. Concrete. A roof seen from below. And let's just leave the whole trapdoor out. Maybe that's something that triggers the artificial intelligence with Adobe. You never know. Okay. I think Photoshop thinks I'm in my naughty mood, so I'm going to skip this image. I'm so very sorry for you guys, but hey, I have one more left. And maybe that one will work. So let's go for this one. Oh, sorry, that one we already did. Excuse me, this one. Now, this one was shot during a workshop online. So we also do workshops online. And at that point, oh no, sorry, this one was shot with a student in the studio. And this student wanted to do something with cosplay and movie sets. The whole idea was actually to do it with artificial intelligence. And I already told the student, hey, this is not my cup of tea. I don't have a lot of experience with this, but I can help you with the lighting. I can help you with getting everything together. This was actually the first time ever I started to experimenting with real artificial intelligence in sets, how to do it. Before that, I just used it to extend my backdrops, to create something nice on the foreground, maybe take out some hairs or add some hairs, but that was it. This was the first time I started to think about how can I create something that works. Now, I really hope I can pull it off and that we don't get this really annoying orange messages there. So let's start. The idea was Star Trek. And my idea was, okay, she's in a fight. Everything is blowing up around her, but I don't want to see explosions. I want to see smoke. I want to have her run through corridors with lights on the side that emit light through the smoke. And the whole idea was, let's see how smart artificial intelligence is by setting up everything 100% correct. So I'm using smoke, I'm using accent lighting, and I'm making sure that my model holds her laser or face or whatever correctly. The hand has to be correctly. How easy is it to create something? Well, it ended up to be incredibly easy, much easier than I thought. So let's draw a line. And in all honesty, I'm doing everything today with a trackpad because my XP pen is at the moment somewhere else. Somewhere else over there, by the way, because we have two workstations here. Okay, so corridor in a spaceship covered in smoke with glowing alarm lights. Okay, let's see what happens. And now I just hope it works. And if somebody knows why the other image doesn't work, let me know. Maybe it's because it doesn't like portrait modes, but only landscape. You never know. There we go. So you can see here, pretty convincing. Do I like this one more? Ooh, this is also really nice. Ah, this one is much better. On the other hand, I think this one is more natural because it looks nicer here. So the original image and this one. And because the smoke just fills everything up, we don't have any problems. Now, what do we want on this side? On this side, we want a window with a blue engine. I don't know. Window in a spaceship. Window in a spaceship with a blue engine behind it, emitting all kinds, emitting, whatever, all kinds of energy. And I'm not going to type in fluctuations. Double T, okay, sorry. I could do it in Dutch, but because most of you guys probably know English, I'm typing it in English. But Adobe actually supports what you can see over 100 languages. Isn't that absolutely awesome? Okay, this looks more like a speaker. No, this doesn't. This looks fake. No, I don't like this at all. So window in a spaceship with an engine room. I don't know. And otherwise, we can also create a corridor over there, of course. This is a little bit hit and miss. It also depends, of course, how you type in your prompts and how well you know everything around Photoshop. For me, it's all fun, so I don't really dive into it. I don't do this a lot. I just play around with it. And I think this doesn't look the way that I want it. So let's delete this. I don't want to take too long, so I'm going to do one more test. I'm going to do it slightly different now. I'm going to do a blue corridor in a spaceship. I'm not going to do anything with windows. Corridor in a spaceship blown up with blue smoke and sparkles. Let's try it. Now, in all honesty, this is the fun part about artificial intelligence, just typing it in, seeing what happens, and just playing around with an image. Where I think we go wrong is if we just start typing in stuff, seeing a great image, and posting it as our art. This is not our art. Not our art. This is just fun. And as soon as we start labeling this as real or art or I created this, no, you didn't create this. Now, in my case, and not because I do this, but in my case, as you can see here, the image was already in my mind. I'm already telling you exactly what I want to see, and I don't have the budget to build a whole movie set. So in those cases, I have a little bit less problems with using artificial intelligence because you still have to think about lighting, setting up the shot, making sure your model is there, visualizing everything. And at that point, I think you can label it as digital art, but never as this is 100% my art because it's not. I don't know where the corridor came from. Now, in this case, I think the corridor is 100% usable, of course, but you never know where it came from. Okay, for now, we're just going to leave it here. I'm not 100% satisfied with it, but okay. Now, I want to make sure that I have nice contrast in my image, so I'm going to go for a Skylum, and I'm going to do my pre-work in Luminar. Let me see in between if you guys have any questions. Yes. Okay. Somebody asked me what the rabbit problem was. We started a little bit late, and I also said that I was a little bit stressed. I'm a huge animal fan and lover, and we have a dog called Chewy, and we live in a rural area, and that means we have a garden, and sometimes in the garden we also have rabbits. And Chewy is now almost 7, and this never happened before. He actually caught 2 baby rabbits, and I had to run outside 10 minutes, or I think half an hour before the start of the show. Had to run outside, capture the dog, save the baby rabbit, and we had to wait for the animal ambulance to come in and grab the rabbit and bring it to a vet. Because, hey, in all honesty, all animals are precious. So we made sure that it got to the vet, and I'm still waiting for a message from Anoweek to see if it made it. But I did hear a small phone call that didn't give me any real pleasure sensations. That's I said it wrong. Sorry. I meant it didn't give me any good idea. So let's hope that it survived. Sorry, again, English is not my native tongue, so if I say something that sounds bad, it was not meant that way. Now, if it was funny, it was absolutely meant that way, of course. So let's go for edit. Sorry, I did something wrong. In this case, I'm just going to use boost. So I'm going to go for detail. Yeah. So I'm going to go for structure and just boost it a little bit, not too much. Just want to make it slightly more grungy. I do want to have a little bit more light on my model's face. Nice. And the rest is okay. So in this case, I could do a little bit of skin work, but I want to skip that for now. I forgot it. Sorry. But maybe that's a nice way to show you Aperty, by the way. Oh, I don't know. It only happens when we stream. Let's go for Skylum. Let's go for Aperty. And let's see what it can do with her face. Because now, of course, we have a face with different colors. And often for software, this is very, very difficult. And again, it would surprise me if it does it perfectly, but you never know. Normally for, especially if it's in the red, I do it manually. But let's see how software solves this. That's not bad. It does only do the skin tones, as you can see here. But hey, it looks great, so why not? And maybe if we go like, hey, go for the whole body. No. Okay, it keeps doing the face only. Okay, better press apply. Now, normally the sides, I would just use a clone tool or dots and burn. And there's another filter that does do that side, and that's actually called imagenomic portraiture. Now, in all honesty, imagenomic portraiture is not very cheap, and it only does skin. It's focused purely on skin work. And in all honesty, all the times that I need image-normal portraiture is when I use color gels where normal software doesn't recognize the skin. And to spend so much money on one plugin, if you have the plugin also in Aperty, in Luminar Neo, I think that's maybe a waste of money, unless if you are really focused on doing fashion work and beauty, then image normal portraiture is one of the best skin retouching software on the world. But Aperty comes incredibly close at the moment. So in my opinion, if you are a portrait photographer, get Aperty. If you're an all-round photographer that also does portraiture, get Luminar Neo. Both are awesome. Okay, let's go into Boris FX. Again, this is my go-to software if I want to freak out, if I want to do stuff. Boris FX is a subscription, but oh man, it's worth it. And I hate subscriptions except for Photoshop, because that's just a great deal for your money. Let's be honest, what you get, it's insane. And Boris FX is the only other subscription actually that I highly advise. So let's first go for lighting effects. I want to go for lens flares, and as mentioned before, she has a phaser, so I want to make sure that she shoots somebody. So I have to make sure that I fit it right on the spot where I want it. Let's do it here. Nice. And then just find something that looks cool. Like this. Wow. Isn't it awesome? Let's do another layer, and let's add some cool atmospheric effects. For example, around here, we want to make sure that we have some proper cool over the top lighting effects. There we go. Let's add another layer, because, well, when you do a Star Wars or a Star Trek movie, you of course have to have a lot of lens flares, right? Because those are cool. If you don't get the joke, the first, I believe, Star Trek with the new cast, they used a lot of lens flares. And at the moment, I think there were some interviews with James Cameron who did it. He said, well, I just love the software, but now when I look back at it, and I hope I remember that correctly, I think he was a little bit like, yeah, maybe we did it too much. And it was mostly these lens flares. So that's why I'm adding these in, all those lines. And just look at that first Star Trek movie with the new cast. You will see immediately what I mean. It's actually funny when you look back at it. And that's also one of the first times I probably saw sapphires, and Boris FX is part, of course, of that family of software. Okay, I really like this. Okay, now we want to glue everything together, and that's when I'm using the Film Lab. Film Lab for me is always the effect of everything is glued together, because now the colors blend together, now the whole look is being determined. And for me, that's also the most important part of the shot, because this is where my normal shot with normal colors comes into the shot that I have in mind, the moody shot or maybe the over the top bright shot. But this is where it's determined in the tinting. And in this case, I'm just going through the film pack. So in other words, these are emulations of film rolls. And sometimes that's more than enough. Like, for example, I really like this. Just look at the difference. It's subtle, and I hope you can see it on YouTube, but it just gives you so much more of that film look. Like, this looks okay, but it still looks red and blue. And when I go for this is more moody. Very nice. I think for Boris FX, this is it. You could, of course, add some effect with, for example, smoke. So let's go for our particle illusion, and let's search for smoke or mist. It doesn't do that. Okay. Misty Lake. Now, the Misty Lake, of course, is not what I want. I want something like this super mist. There we go. Now, you might think like, hey, that doesn't look right. No, that's true. It doesn't. But as soon as you start fading it, and as soon as you go here into your world transform, you can see some really cool stuff, because you can scale it in the X, and you can scale it in the Y. You can rotate it, but you can also use live. Look at this. It's like watching a movie. You can see the smoke just build up or disappear. You can even give it velocity. Okay, on this doesn't change a lot with this one. You can choose the weight. Also doesn't change with this one. They don't do it with all, but sometimes. Oh, there we go. Nice. And of course, you can do masking and your composite. So I can also give it a color. In this case, of course, we want it to be red smoke. So if you miss some smoke in your image, you go like, oh, I wish I could have added just a little bit of smoke on the bottom. Look at this. Looks 100% natural, just a little bit too much. Let's lower it. There we go. Okay, let's go apply. And let's do the final step. And for this image, I want it more stark. And remember that red trick that I told you guys about. Oops. Yeah. And I hope I'm still streaming. Yes. There we go. Go to here and just go for the red channel and copy that. There we go. Look at that. Wow. Pull the effect back and just slightly edit. Cool. So as you can see, you can use artificial intelligence without any problem in your images, without just destroying everything. But you have to think about, what did I do? How did I create it in the first place? Now, I do want to show you very quickly the final results of the heroes and villains. So I'm going to go to frankdorhoff.smugmug.com. Okay, I'm going to drag it over here and just go for our heroes and villains page. And as you can see here, this is the one that we created in the end. So a bunker, some spider webs, some snakes, a nice opening here. I see the whip could have been better, by the way. And then the one that I just retouched, this is what we eventually did with the window, with the machine behind it. I actually like the version I did today better than this one. I wish I would have saved it. Okay, so overall, I think this concludes it. I will, let me switch that off and go here. Now, mostly during the live shows, we don't have a lot of viewers live because we do it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon in the Netherlands. So for the Netherlands, that's too early. And often for abroad, it fits in the middle of the day. So that means that during the live broadcast, we don't have a lot of viewers that can ask questions. But when we're done, you can watch a recording, and you probably are watching a recording now, unless you are watching live. But if you watch this later, you're watching a recording. Do you get it? Feel free to leave any questions below. The Digital Classroom is a project which is made possible by, of course, our sponsors, BenQ, Rogue, IQ Wire, Click Backdrops, Cascable, and of course also BenQ. But what you do have, and Gigoto, of course, didn't forget anybody, I hope. But what you also, of course, have to realize, it's mostly created by you guys. If you ask me questions, I can make new episodes. I can create the how did I shoot this ones. So feel free to leave comments below. You will always get an answer, or we will answer it in the next episode of Digital Classroom. And well, see you again next time. I don't have anything to add at the moment because Week isn't here. So she always gives me the news. So thank you so very much for watching, guys. And we'll leave the links to the software in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed it. See you again next time. Keep retouching. Bye, guys. Oh, and don't use too much art.